Well, welcome to this edition of the DMZ America podcast. It is Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. We're still solvent as of today. We are too big to fail. I'm Scott Stantis coming to you from the right.
And I'm Ted Rall coming to you from the left. I've been trying to lose some weight, but maybe I am still too big to fail.
I am too big to fail. No, it's amazing. Obviously, we're going to talk about the Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank going under and not being allowed to go under. The U.S. government stepped up using not tax dollars, interestingly, but draining the FDIC account to cover accounts that it said it wasn't going to account. Ted, let me ask you this. This is a question that's obviously I love economics, so this has been kind of this is what passes for fun for Scott the last 48 hours.
Republicans are so kinky.
Tell me about your derivatives, baby. But okay, so like I just mentioned, the Silicon Valley Bank goes under, Signature Bank goes under, and the FDIC, under the auspices of the executive branch and President Biden, assures all of the depositors. Now, here's my question. The depositors knew that these deposits were not insured. Surely,
some of them were. The FDIC, every account, each individual account is insured up to $250,000 in the United States. So it would have been really simple for them. If let's say you have $2.5 million, you could break that money up into 10 even different bank accounts in the same bank, and you'd be fully covered. They didn't do that. So it reminds me of 2008 when the banks were, and this obviously has not reached that level yet. Although if you look at what the stock market and the causes are exactly the opposite. So
what do you mean?
So in 2008, what you had was bankers gone wild, right? They had gotten bored with the staid business of being in a margin business where you collect deposits and pay low interest rates and loan out money at high interest rates, like for credit cards and mortgages, and you could sit back and collect the profit. That wasn't enough for them, so they got involved in these crazy synthetic derivatives, and they basically started extend the underlying mortgages that backed those mortgage derivatives were foul. And once that came to light, there was a stampede, and the value of those derivatives tanked. And basically, it was like they were recklessly lending to people who couldn't afford to pay for the homes that they had purchased. This is a different matter. This is really caused, as you pointed out in your center clip recently, this is really caused, ironically, by banks doing the right thing and getting screwed by the Federal Reserve Bank. So what's happened is that since Dodd-Frank and since 2008, banks have become considerably more conservative. They're regulated accordingly, and they keep their cash reserves usually in treasury bonds and notes. The thing is about bonds are that as interest rates go up, the value of the bond drops. So, and vice versa. That's just the nature of bonds. So as the Fed has been increasing week after week, month after month interest rates, the value of the portfolios held by these banks has been dropping accordingly. And so every time the Fed decides to increase interest rates, they've been stressing the banking system. And this proved to be too much for Silicon Valley Bank and for Signature Bank. These were not high-flying, crazy, out-of-control banks doing crazy things. This is an old-fashioned bank run, but the truth is that the underlying fundamental management style of these banks was fairly sound. What was not sound has been the obsessive nature of the Federal Reserve's hard-on for inflation and fighting it. If they had taken it easier, as you and I have discussed and we have agreed on here on the podcast, if they had just allowed the pent-up consumer demand from the pandemic to peter out, this wouldn't have happened. The inflation would have come down, or they could have just had a less aggressive approach with fewer and smaller interest rate hikes. But what they've done is they've gone too far. The Fed's meeting tomorrow, by the way, and they had been expected to announce a very robust, perhaps 50 basis point increase, which is 0.5%. That doesn't look like it's likely to happen. If it does, I mean, it could really be cataclysmic globally, because this contagion has also spread to Europe. The shares in several European banks, including the biggest bank in France, BNP Paribas, and Credit Suisse, which I believe is the biggest bank in Switzerland, were halted today on the European Stock Exchange because they had plunged so dramatically. I think roughly 11% in one day. It's, this is it's also, these are staid kind of, I mean, Credit Suisse is a little bit high flying, a little reckless, but not BNP Paribas. And these guys are, so they're really being punished for an aggressively conservative monetary policy.
And let's not forget that yesterday over 20 banks had to have their stocks suspended from trading because it was, they were plummeting.
Which parenthetically, just as a libertarian, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about this? It doesn't seem to me like a free market when a stock is no longer tradable. I understand what they're trying to do is prevent panic selling, but if that's the direction the market wants to go in, shouldn't, from a free market perspective, shouldn't that be allowed to take place?
I guess my question would be, does the stoppage come from a federal agency, or does it come from the people who own and run the stock market?
It comes from the exchange, from the stock exchange.
Then you can make any rules you want, and I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it really does. These things, if a stock, especially an important and big stocks, and bank stocks, let's be clear, are pretty important. If they're in free fall, you want to stop that. You want to allow banks, for instance, to close their doors if there's a run on the bank. You want to have those kinds of tools in the bag to pull out when something like this happens. The question is, well, there's a bunch of questions, not least of which is we talk about politics. I'm generally not mad at Joe Biden. I mean, I know a lot of my conservative friends, he's Hitler, he's Mussolini, no,
he's sleepy Hitler. Apparently he doesn't get up until 9 a.m, right? Do you hear about that?
Is that true? No. Is that true?
Yeah, dude, I can't believe that like every cartoonist isn't doing this story. I managed to do a cartoon for Sputnik about it yesterday, but Jen Psaki, former White House press secretary, a day or two ago, I guess it was yesterday, praised the president for issuing a rare statement at 9 o'clock in the morning saying, quote unquote, Joe Biden doesn't do anything at 9 a.m. And you'll love this part. He's a night owl.
Oh, I used to be, but I also used to have to get up early because, I had a job.
I also don't think he's a night owl either.
No, I don't believe that. I find that hard to believe, but maybe he is. But his assurance.
Also, he's the president of the United States. Really? He's like sleeping in? He's like,
Reagan,
he's like a 19-year-old.
When Ronald Reagan came into office following Jimmy Carter got up at ungodly o'clock. But Jimmy Carter grew up on a farm where you got up before sunrise. I mean, that was just true. That was how he was raised, and was his natural.
Well, that's what highly successful people do.
A lot of them do.
They often get up early because the phone's not ringing at 5 a.m.
Yeah. But with Reagan, what he wanted to do is get a little bit back to normal work business hours. But that was a misnomer in the sense that when he became president, especially the first year, he wouldn't go to bed. In fact, Nancy moaned about this because he wouldn't go to sleep until 1 or 2 in the morning. There's so much briefing material that he had to consume before he went to sleep. But when Biden on Monday, President Biden said that this is okay, nothing to worry about. Firstly, I think that's irresponsible, Ted. I think that is irresponsible in the extreme, in that nobody, because isn't the president's job to be like the national soother, like the ship's captain, like ignore that silly iceberg, no problem, exactly,
everything's gonna be just fine,
everything's hunky-dory,
nothing but fear, but fear itself, right? I mean, I'm not kidding.
No, I understand that, but by turns, he didn't have the facts, and it looks ridiculous when the president says everything is just hunky-dory, and then they have to suspend trading on banks. This contagion is clearly going overseas, that this is a much more dangerous situation than we suspected. And I think people are look what happened to the stock market today. As of March 15th, the Ides of March, the stock market plummet. Last time I checked was 600 points. Let's take a look real quick to see what's happening here. World markets are crumbling.
Yeah, it opened 500. The Dow was down 500 points at opening. That's the last time I checked. I've been drawing since then.
Really? Well, thank you for keeping the cogs of industry moving, Ted. America salutes you.
That's right. Someone's got to do it.
A grateful nation salutes you. As of right now, it's down 660 points. NASDAQ down 137. New York Stock Exchange down 392. So, I mean, obviously, if things, and we're going to see what happens after the markets close. My point is that this is clearly not okay. It's not just two, randy, crazy, banks that just happen to fail.
Though. It is fixable.
Tell me
I mean, the Fed really, everybody's going to be watching the Fed tomorrow. They have to announce no interest rate increase. They have to.
They can't control themselves. They can't control themselves, Ted.
They have to say that, like, we understand what's going on here. We may consider we'll revisit this later on. And if we feel that another increase is called for, we will announce that. But pending that time, that kind of decision, we will, with that assessment, we'll stand down right now. They've got to. There's no other choice.
Yes, there is. They can't help themselves. They are in literally the ivory tower. And
but Janet, I mean, they do know what's going on. I mean, they do. The Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, is not a stupid woman.
I'm also going to throw out another statistic we haven't mentioned yet, and that just got issued today. And with the other economic news, it's been kind of downplayed and it hasn't gotten headlines at all, Ted. I'm not sure if you've seen this. Inflation's down.
Yeah, no, I've seen that. It's been ticking down. I guess you could say that, which is also, by the way, interesting because unemployment is not going up. And so this is kind of, it's always been, as an economics geek, this, it's always been what sort of believed, even by those of us on the left, that that higher wages were a major factor in inflation, not just higher prices. And the thing is, this does not, the thing is, I think the right and the left have argued to what extent that was true. But here you have you have a month where, inflation is ticking down and unemployment is not going up. That's remarkable. That's unusual. You don't see that. This is a strange economy.
You don't see it because I don't think it's true. I think we're going on models that have been proven over the last couple of decades, Ted, to be unreliable.
It's also true that inflation and unemployment are not calculated the same way that they used to be anymore.
This is true.
So that's an issue.
Yes. Oh no, they have tinkered and futz around with the employment number. I think it's almost meaningless.
There's a website called Shadow Government Statistics. It's called shadowstats.com that I always go to, and basically it's the charts of what unemployment, inflation, and other major economic indicators look like if they were continued to be calculated the way they used to be, like in the 80s. So you can really compare apples to apples. And it's fascinating. Newsflash, unemployment and inflation are much, much higher than you think.
Inflation is?
Yeah, inflation is too. Basically inflation, according to Shadow Stats, is about 10% higher than the official inflation rate, if you calculated it the way that it used to be calculated. They've jiggered all sorts. They've created all sorts of ridiculous assumptions. For example, so if a television used to cost $400 and now it still costs $400, that just sounds to you and me like 0% inflation, right? But they'll say this smart television has many more features than the old rabbit ear Sony Trinitron that you used to have. So therefore, the $400 that you're spending on your flat screen, your Roku flat screen, is actually more like you're spending $150 for it because it's got so many more features. But of course, that's not the way people really think. People just buy the best TV that they can afford, and the technology keeps improving. It's not like, and you don't even have the choice, by the way, of buying the old rabbit ear. It's not even on sale. You can't, and it won't work if you plug it in. So, because it won't get those signals anymore because it's all digital transmission.
Yeah.
So it's a ridiculous assumption, but that's one of the main ones that they do to jigger. And unemployment is also much higher because we're not counting all the people who drop out of the labor participation force. So basically, it used to be like 68% of all Americans worked Now it's like more like 62%. Well, those 6% of, did they just kick off? Are they all living in Tahiti and having a good time and enjoying their golden years? Or are they, underemployed, subsisting, couch surfing, working odd jobs, on disability? I'm going to go with that second part.
Meta just announced yesterday, by the way, it's laying off another 10,000 workers.
I think, I kind of have to admit I'm pretty sanguine about the problems in the tech sector, because the thing about tech is it basically sucks money out of the economy, but it doesn't employ anyone. A company like Facebook employs fewer than 100,000 people, but it's got a market cap of 2 or 3 times like General Motors and all of its affiliated subsidiaries. But GM and the GM family employs between 2 and 3 million Americans who, send their kids to college and buy cars and do all sorts of things with that money. I mean, GM is a massive force that pumps money into the American economy. Facebook is a massive force that sucks advertising dollars out of the American economy, probably most of which ends up, in numbered accounts in the Caymans.
So let's look forward. What today things are shaky, but they haven't collapsed. What are we looking at for the rest of this week? I mean, and here's the thing: why should let me just tap the brakes ourselves and tell our listeners why should we listen to 2 cartoonists? And I think one of the things we wanted to do with this podcast is say, because cartoonists are pretty smart. They have
smarter than editors think.
Well, smarter than editors, period. But that's another issue for another podcast. In all seriousness, I mean, most cartoonists I know have a wide range of interests. I have attended George Mason University School of, they have special Institute for Humane Studies. They have special courses for economics. I've attended 3 of those. I know Ted has, actually a college degree from a reputable institution.
Yeah, well, somewhat reputable anyway.
But I guess so why you should listen to us? I mean, because we're looking at this from.
Don't forget, I also used to work in banking.
Yes. Well, and that's
I was a trust officer and an AVP at the Industrial Bank of Japan Trust Company from 1986 to 1990. I was a trader at Bear Stearns from 1984 to 1986. I was a bank consultant at a company called Spectrum Group in San Francisco in the early 90s. So, granted, that's old, but it's not like I don't know anything about, money or.
Well, but I'm fascinated by money and fascinated by economics and have some certificates to show for it. And here's the thing: Ted has been right on more things than any other experts that I can cite, and I've been right, especially for some reason the last 5 years. I've been especially right on things.
That's true, and you've been on a roll lately. Holy shit!
And I think looking at this, I mean, when just Silicon Valley went under. When I saw that story, I called Ted. I contacted Ted, and I just went, "Holy shit cakes! This is very, 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 very bad, and this feels like the tip of an iceberg." And sure enough,
it freaks me out that that there's been such that this can happen due to a lack of reckless behavior. I mean, to put a fine point on it, if Silicon Valley Bank had invested their money instead of used treasury bonds and treasury notes, had invested in developing world funds or Chinese stocks, they'd still be open today. The Fed fucked them. I mean, that's what literally.
Well, and that's
happened.
The thing. You said there's no recklessness here, and I would totally disagree. I think the Fed was reckless. They were following a model. I mentioned this a few minutes ago. They're following a model that they used in the 70s to tamp down inflation. And guess what, kids? It didn't fucking work then. It's not going to fucking work now.
What you mean, like causing back-to-back recessions means it didn't work?
But you had a recession. Don't forget, you had stagflation. The late 70s were a nightmare where you had prices going up an average of 20%. Interest rates were at 18%. Mm-hmm. What finally stopped it was loosening up the markets. facilitating supply chains and allowing competition to do what competition does best, which is lower prices. And that's where we are. Pandemic comes, cough, cough,
Well,
world
also
shuts down.
fuel prices dropped, right? The energy crisis came to an end by the 80s. So
I actually did a cartoon essay on the very first one in the 70s, God, it had to have been late 70s. And I talk about how, oh
OPEC
my
was
God,
like 74, 75, I think, right?
there was another one, but there's another one in
Later.
70. Oh boy, I want to say 79.
Yeah, I want to say
79.
78 or 79. Yeah.
And I talked about, because there were lines. I was living in California at the time, and we're dealing with the mile long lines to get gasoline. And I talked about in the piece saying, "Oh my God, gas is actually reaching $1 a gallon. That's nuts."
Yeah. Well, yes. If only we could go back to that. Of course.
Of course. So I mean, this is right in the lap.
You
of
were on top of this. This is my time. You usually, sometimes you've been very gracious about giving me credit for being right. But this is one of those times where I doubted you about the Fed, tanking the economy. I thought it was just that they were going too far, but I thought we might still come in for a soft landing. And you've been warning about this in very, very certain terms for weeks, months, and you've been this completely vindicates everything you've been saying.
Well, that's very gracious of you. Thank you. No, I wish I was wrong. I would love to be wrong, but
I know that feeling.
Before we wrap up this segment, in all seriousness, I'm looking at. I just did a cartoon for Counterpoint about the Joe Biden economy sort of going away. I don't think this isn't going to be a blip and a scare. And by the end of the week, we're all going to take a deep breath and go, "Wow, that was close." I think.
Well, I don't think we're going to see major bank closures, right? It's not like J.P. Morgan Chase is going to go under. It's not like Citigroup is going under. B of A got hammered on their stocks because they have so many deposits in California. But even so, it's okay.
I'm going to disagree.
They're not going to go under.
We're going to see some. It's not going to be 2008, but it's not going to be good. We're going to see a collapse. We're going to see a recession, and that is exactly what the Federal Reserve wanted. Now, here's the thing, and the last question: would you rather have a job and be paying more for stuff, or would you rather be unemployed and stuff?
Yeah, I'd rather, obviously. I'll take option A for $500, Alex.
And that's where we're headed, and that's what scares the hell out of me. And that's why tomorrow, when the Fed meets, Ted, I'm not convinced. I'll bet you a beer that they raise interest rates. It won't be the draconian like a 0.5%, but they're going to back off that number, but they're going to crack it.
I could see that. That is totally the stupid fucking political thing to do. Like, oh, well, let's split the difference. There's an argument inside the Fed, and then they're like, okay, fine, fuck it. We'll do a 1/4 point, or we'll do 3/16 or some shit. I could see that. I could really see that.
And this is where Scott
shouldn't do anything. They should not do anything.
No, this is where Scott will do his.
We were mistaken. We were mistaken. And we reserve the right to do whatever the fuck we want, like in next month. But right now we're letting things stand.
I'm going to do my little libertarian dance and say, see what happens when you let government institutions that aren't, answerable to the American people do whatever the fuck they want. This is what you get.
Scott, I mean, okay. So I'm gonna make fun of libertarianism now. So who sets interest rates if there's no monetary system? I mean, someone has to set interest rates. I mean, otherwise you're gonna have like it's gonna be like a souk. It's not going to be a monetary system as Western countries know it.
Right. Souks work pretty well. I think you'll have central banks that'll establish their interest rates, which will set the standard for the smaller banking systems in their countries. And that's how I think and that's how this goes. This is just, I mean, we're going to talk about, I wanted to talk about fiction and our belief in it now, and our belief in, there's no reality is sort of subjective now. Apparently the existentialists have won on all levels. And we're going to talk about that coming up.
Well, I always knew that they made the most sense.
It's all absurd. Oh, and then we're going to smoke cigarettes and laugh at life. That was my short imitation.
Remind me not to borrow your pen next time I'm in.
I chew the shit out of my pens. By the way, before we
what pen is that? Let me see that pen.
Well, it's a fountain pen.
Oh, is it? Oh, what brand is it? Oh, is it real?
Oh,
It's a real one.
no, it's a disposable. I love
Oh
these
yeah, that's
things.
what I had. Look
It's
what
a
I think
Pilot
we had
V
the same
pen.
kind. Yep, I have a Pilot Varsity.
Oh,
Isn't that
there it
funny?
is. It's great to draw with these things. I mean,
Yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah,
awesome. Just awesome.
yeah.
Hey, by the way, before we bail out, I just want to remind the listeners that we also are offering our podcast videos on YouTube. You can go to Ted Rall or you can go to Scott Stantis and watch, two aging cartoonists
Just
talk
talk
about
to
stuff.
each other. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't. I have to admit, I totally do not understand the appeal of video, like watching. People apparently do. I mean, last week was the first time that we did it, and we noticed that like the numbers of the audio version dropped. And Scott, you were like, "What's people hate us now? Where are they?" And I was like, "No, they're all over on the video," and they were.
Yeah, yeah.
But I myself, I have watched the video version of podcasts, and I think I watch a little bit, and then I just leave it on and walk around. I guess if I
Yeah, I think that's
play
what
it
they
through
do. They
my
play it in the background. They play it like a podcast, but they can turn around and see, oh, look, there's Ted's background. What does he have hanging up there? Oh, he's got the commie poster. Oh, look at that.
right. Now I think they
Um,
like that's right. I mean, I don't know. Personally, it's a little bit like watching paint dry, but it's oddly fascinating. Like I remember watching Rush Limbaugh, and you just see the top of his bald head, like the angle of the camera was so weird.
well, it's
And
just that pile of oxycodone disappearing over the course of the show was fun to watch. He did upwards of 20 a day.
God bless him. Hey, question before we
Yes.
close out this segment.
Okay.
I mean, this is a
Yes.
political podcast between left and right. What are the
Okay.
political? You touched upon that, and then I think I distracted you. What are the
Squirrel.
political implications for the Biden administration, or for the Biden campaign and the Democrats and the Republicans going into 2024?
I believe it was Rasmussen poll. I wish I'd written the source, but one of the major polls came out today, 49% approval for President Biden.
What? That's way up.
Yeah. I know it's been ticking up.
He had never gone over 44.
It's been ticking up over the last 10 days or so.
Yeah, well, we'll see how that looks next time.
Well, and you asked the question, what are the political ramifications? If it goes Scott's way, the way I'm predicting, then it's really bad for Joe Biden. If it goes Ted's way, and this is just a blip, and we all come back to our senses, and oh boy, that was a close call on the freeway. Whew, wow, we made it past that. Then he's fine. Then he continues to.
I don't think it helps though. Even if it goes my way, I think there's a general perception that Republicans, that Republicans have been able to exploit, and I think this adds to it, that this administration, it means well, but it's not super competent as from an administrative standpoint, right? So I think most Americans are okay with the fact that we got the fuck out of Afghanistan, but the way that Biden did it was so insanely incompetent and chaotic, and we've seen that sort of thing happen time and time again. This will feel another like it's kind of like I've been on a date with this guy now for 3 years, and it's like bad things have happened. We got food poisoning at the restaurant. The sprinklers came on, and someone stole my purse. And I don't know. None of this might be his fault, but it's like he brings bad luck.
Oh, don't forget Jimmy Carter, the stuff that hit him. It wasn't his fault. I think the taking of the American hostages
sure fucking was.
Yeah, it was. That was. He told the Marines not to shoot when the Russian Marines were told, "Oh,
he also let the Shah come to America, for medical treatment."
I don't have a problem with that.
Well, okay, but you might have a so then President Stantis would have also caused the hostage crisis.
No, because I would have had my guards on the ground at my embassy shoot anyone who jumped the fence.
So then we'd have a hot war in Tehran.
No, that's what Russia did. Russia issued that order and made it very clear to the protesters that if you jump over this is sovereign Soviet territory, we will shoot you.
Mm-hmm. Well,
in fact, what's his name? What's his name? That guy who does those things. Him,
the dude.
Pat Oliphant did a cartoon on that. It's a Soviet embassy next to the American embassy, and the radicals in Tehran are climbing over the fence and attacking the American embassy, and the soldiers looking over at the Russian, and the Russians saying, because they know we do not allow such things. That would have been. I think a very simple order like that would have
Okay, but also you
saved
could
that
just
up.
not, you could just like not let the Shah in.
Well, but the guy needed medical help.
Fuck him. He was a fucking tyrannical despot who tortured
Oh,
many,
who
many people
amongst
to death.
us? Who among?
So true. So true. All right. So I think, so, all right. So the politics depend on how long this lasts, basically.
Oh yeah, yeah. How deep this is,
But
and
it's not a win for Biden. It isn't. I mean,
no,
look,
it's a what?
at best,
Ted, it's
it's
a
just
bad
neutral.
look. It's a bad look when the president stands there on Monday and says everything's there. It reminds me of that Kevin Bacon character in Animal House when he's playing the ROTC guy. He's going, "All is well, remain calm," and he gets trampled flat.
Right. Well, there's no. I mean, he also said the same thing. There's no crisis at the border. Right. That was the other thing.
And that's a serious issue too we're facing now.
And then don't forget, I mean, the Republicans are going to play footage of him saying like inflation isn't a big deal, don't worry about it.
Right.
So he has a bad habit of making predictions that don't come to pass.
So I understand wanting to assuage the American public's concerns, but you assuage it with, I don't know, facts, because I think we can handle it. I've always felt that.
And uncertainty is okay. I think it's okay to say, look, this is what's going on. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. We're checking into what we don't know. I will be in touch with you throughout this problem, like the Cuban Missile Crisis. I will talk to you every night and keep you informed. I'm not going to make things up.
And coming back to how you started this segment, Ted, we have nothing to fear, but fear itself was merely addressing that exact issue. That yes, there's uncertainty, but the worst thing we can do right now is panic. So that's what this president should have said. Not everything's great. I like Ovaltine. Where's my Ovaltine? Anyway, okay.
I love sleeping until 11 o'clock in the morning.
You are listening to the DMZ America podcast. I'm Scott Stantis coming to you from the right.
And watching it too. And I'm Ted Rall coming to you from the left.
And we'll be back right after this.